thunderstorm. Maybe in 3 months the trees, they got infected and all of the crop is diseased, they can't be used. But I keep the money no matter what. Yeah, so these trades, they all involved gharar. So this means something unknown, uncertain. So Islam said any contract which you make where there's something uncertain or unknown, this is prohibited. There has to be knowledge. And it's when you use these type of contracts, that's how you trick people. That's how the buyer, or the seller rather, the seller will trick someone into buying a product that's no good. And this is the same way that the banks, they would get together the loans of all of these people and they would sell it on as if it was what they call a grade A product. Yeah, so they would sell it as if it was something that was very good quality, very high quality. So this is one of the things Islam prohibited. Why? Because it said that when people make trade, when we buy and sell, we have to have certainty about how we trade. So we don't use deception, we don't sell something where it's not known whether it will come to term, whether it will actually be valid at the time we exchange the goods. We exchange the goods and the money. And likewise we know, as I'm sure we're all aware, Islam has prohibited riba. Yeah? So Islam has prohibited for Muslims to engage in dealing in interest. And obviously it's very strongly condemned in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, الَّذِينَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ He said, الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ الرِّبَا لَا يَقُومُونَ إِلَّا كَمَا يَقُومُ الَّذِي يَتَخَبَّطُهُ الشَّيْطَانُ مِنَ الْمَسِّ. You know that He said, those who engage in riba, they will stand on the day of judgment as like one who has been driven insane by the touch of shaitan. This is how serious the issue of riba is. That the person who engages in it, he will be in the condition. You imagine the condition of someone on the day of judgment. He's like someone who's been touched and driven insane by the touch of shaitan. And He said, and Allah continues subhanahu wa ta'ala, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا الْبَيْءُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَا. That is because they say that trade is like riba. It's all the same thing. وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْءُ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. But Allah has allowed trade. He's allowed buying and selling, but He made riba haram. Now what we see with these banks is that these banks, they have what they call a reserve ratio. So what they have, why these banks are so important, is because what they'll do is, let's say brother here, Brother Cash is going to go to the bank, he will get his wage from work, he gets £100, yeah? Maybe that's his hourly rate, alhamdulillah. Yeah, so he puts in £100 into the bank. Now the bank, they are allowed to loan that money out again for interest, yeah, or to give that out to other customers. What they will do, they will give out £90, yeah. So they are able to loan or use £90 of that. £10 they have to keep in their reserves, but 90 they can use to give a new account to somebody, to use in a loan or for any other purpose. Then of the next £90 that's given to another person, they will be able to give, the bank again has to keep this 10%. They will give £81 and they have to keep £9. Yeah? So they always reserve 10% of all the money they're giving out. That means basically, for every £100 they get in, they will be able to loan out or use in their reserves £1,000. So every time they get 100, they can give out 1,000. That's based on a 10% reserve ratio. Yeah? If the reserve ratio is 5%, then they'll be able to give out double. Every £100, they give out 2,000. Yeah? So you see that this increase means that the banks are very powerful. They're very powerful in the economy because they can actually concentrate the wealth of the economy in their hands. And that's why when the banks were doing all of these dodgy deals, no one could turn around to them and say, you can't do that. They would say, but what do you mean? We're the banks. We're at the center of the economy. We're the people who are making this economy so prosperous. We're the ones who are making you successful. So they were treated with this special treatment until they made the whole economy collapse. And then everyone started to say, oh, we hate the people in the banks. We need to close these banks down. We need to do something about them. After they dragged everybody around the world to the ground. So we see that Islam, rather than letting people concentrate their wealth through interest, it actually made the economy one where people trade and they have to exchange on a basis which is fair. Because in Islam, if you loan someone, for example, if I want to go into business with this brother, I can't loan him and say, look, I'm giving you this money, you've got to pay me back this interest, and I'm just sitting there and getting that money back from him. Yeah? So whether he's doing well in his business or not, I don't need to worry. That's why banks get into interest. That's why they do riba. Yeah? Because it's easy. I loan the money, he has to deal with the consequences. In Islam, we have contracts where people can trade, they can loan money, but it's called mudaraba. And this means when I loan money to his brother, I'm investing in his business and we are sharing the risk. So we are working as partners together. And that means any losses, we share the risk of the business as well. So rather than giving this money to that person, like that cleaner that I mentioned earlier, and the janitor, where the bank said, all right, we'll give you the loan for your house, even if you can't afford to pay us back. Rather than that situation, if I loan money to somebody, I have to see, okay, can they pay back? And I'm going to share the risk of the money that I'm loaning them. So this is how Islam addressed and solved these problems. So there's a number of issues that Islam, because Islam has its own economic system, that is solved. And that's why if you have the Islamic State, if we have a Khilafah, you would find under that system that the Muslims and the non-Muslims, they would actually prosper in that situation. Because you won't have an economy that goes up and up and up and then collapses, but what you will find is that the growth will be very stable. Yeah? And what you would find is you won't have these big banks who've got all of the wealth concentrated in their hands. But instead, you would find that people will be able to trade in a way that they're not cheated. People will be able to buy and sell, and they won't actually be buying and selling things that they don't know how much they're worth. So the Islamic economy will be one that will ensure that people, they can actually have a fair life. And they can actually have a prosperous life. Because it circulates wealth and doesn't allow it to be concentrated in the hands of these big banks. Now just to sum up, we'll finish up because time's running out. Someone could say, but look, these banks here, everyone's learnt the lesson. Yeah, these banks, everyone's criticizing the banks. Everyone's talking about this big financial crisis, and it's a big problem. So everyone's learnt the lesson, even the banks have learnt their lesson. They will be much more careful in future. So someone could say, yeah, Islam, maybe you think Islam has the answers, but here in the West, we're able to learn from our mistakes. We're able to move on. And what you will see is very clear. If you're following the news, you'll see why that's not the case. Because despite all of this crisis happening, this economy still revolves around certain basic ideas, which is what? That you are here to get as much material gain as possible. That life is about gaining the most amount of material pleasure and wealth. And that you should be free as much as possible to do that. So when the politicians, if they want to solve this problem, all the banks turn around to do is say that, look, you need to have economic freedom. You need to let us do what we need to do. So here in Britain, you heard about these banks that they did so badly, the government went and bought these banks. And everyone's angry. Why did the banks get money, but the average man in the street, he's not getting money? Yeah? So we found that many people, they were very unhappy. You may have even heard of a man called Fred the Shred. You heard of this man, Fred the Shred? He used to be in charge of a bank called Royal Bank of Scotland. And this bank was one of the biggest failures around the world. And despite how big the failure of that bank was, he was getting something like 700,000 a year in his pension payment. So he left this bank, he got a 15 million pension plan. So once he's left this business that's ruined the economy, it's brought everybody down, the bank is still saying, look, we're going to give you this hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. And everyone was upset. How could they do this? This was terrible. This is a disgrace. How could this happen? This bank has taken money from the public. Yeah, so you would think, after all of this crisis and scandal, even the government will criticize, why did this man get all of this money? Why is he still getting this big pension when all of the people in the country, their taxes went to this bank? So you would think that this would be a big issue that no one would ever repeat. But now we found that the new chairman of that bank, his name is Stephen Hester. Stephen Hester. And guess how much money Stephen Hester is getting? How much is his pension? Now this bank is owned by the average man in the street. He's getting 15 million pounds. He's getting the same deal as the guy who was there before. So these banks, they haven't learned a lesson. And the government hasn't learned a lesson. Why? Because they say, look, this economy is about freedom. Do what you want. So we need to help these banks do what they want. You'll even find in the parliament, in the government, a lot of these government officials, they are paid by the banks. And they are given money to fund their campaigns. So there's one politician in America called Evan Bay. And he has been really heavily saying we shouldn't change the way that banks operate. We shouldn't put any restrictions on them. Guess who's the biggest funder of his political campaign? Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest banks in America.